What was the most epic comeuppance you've ever seen a spoiled kid get? Story 1. I worked at Taco Bell in high school. At the time, we had kids' meals. So this kid comes in with his parents and orders a kids' meal. Apparently, he had been in recently and already had that toy. He started screaming at me to get him another toy. His dad looked at me with an absolutely dejected look on his face and begged me to go get the toy. I dug through the new box of toys and found one. The kid ripped it out of my hands and ran outside, directly into a rose bush. My coworker was legit laying on the ground laughing. Story 2. Not incredibly epic, and not much of a comeuppance, but great nonetheless. I was on a flight from Washington Dulles to Heathrow. This 6 to 8-year-old kid behind me was screaming the whole overnight flight, constantly bitching at his mom for food, toys, what the hell, whatever. Mom was a shh, no honey, shh, sweetheart type. Finally, the mom had to get up to use the restroom. The kid starts wailing. The guy next to me leaned up over his seat, turned around and said, "Hey kid, shut the f*** up." The whole plane didn't clap, but we enjoyed 5 minutes of dead silence till mom came back. Story 3. I guess I'll start. Definitely not the best, but still pleased me. I used to work at a pony camp that catered to rich kids from a very nice neighborhood. We would have really spoiled kids all the time. While annoying, the most frustrating part is trying to maintain authority just so the little shits don't get themselves killed by 1,000-pound animals. Anyways, we had a maybe 10-year-old kid from some mildly famous sportscaster one week. The kid was just downright awful. She ignored everything we told her and was mean to the other kids in camp. At one point, she started a physical fight with another girl, and when she felt like she was getting beaten, she started yelling, "Do you know who my mom is? I'm going to tell her." The other kid got scared and started crying. My coworker replied, "Actually, I do know your mom, and I know she wouldn't like to hear about this. Why don't I call her right now?" The little brat didn't believe her, so my coworker did. She was much easier to deal with the rest of the week. Turns out my coworker worked with her mom many times over the years. She's a professional makeup artist for TV and did her makeup more than a few times. Suck it, spoiled brat. Story 4. I sort of had a "do you know who my mom, dad is" experience as well, but the much more low-key, not rich, just entitled. I substituted teaching a 10th grade English language arts class, and they were instructed to write an essay silently and told by their own teacher to not use their phones. Then she left for a meeting. Any phone usage was written up. Well, being the substitute teacher, there were quite a few students who ignored that rule and were testing me, and even though they were working, I found myself walking around reminding them to put away their phones and to stop talking, and they would stop. One particular student started making phone calls. I told him to put away his phone, and if I caught him doing that again, I would write him up. He then tells me point blank, "I am calling my mother. You probably don't know her, but she is a teacher here, and I am arranging to get my friend and me out of here so that I can work in a more peaceful location." I told him he's not going anywhere. The students become completely silent, stop working, and look at him and me as I write his name down. A woman walks by the room, and the kid acts up a bit. He starts saying, "That's my mom. I'm going to talk to her." I told him, "Stay in your seat." He does, but accuses me of not believing him. "You don't believe me? That's my mom. She's a teacher here." I never say I didn't believe him, but I took a chance, walked to this woman, and explained to her that her son was making phone calls in class, despite warnings when he should be in the middle of writing an essay. I added that he plans on leaving class and he was attempting to use his mother's status as a way out. She was indeed his mother, and she ripped him a new one right in front of his peers, and the students burst out laughing after she leaves. He accuses me of blowing it out of proportion. I told him to finish his essay. After that, the class was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, and I found a comfortable seat by the window. I felt kind of bad about it because I know high school can be tough, so I talked to their teacher afterward. The teacher said he probably needed it. Turns out this particular kid did this a lot. The other students often called him out for using his mom for special privileges. He would ask his mom to write late passes so he could be excused almost daily. Story 7. This one was told to me by my parents since I was too young to remember at the time. The neighborhood bus stop for the Catholic high school was on the corner where our house sits. Sometimes when it was raining, the kids would wait right next door to our house for cover. That didn't bother my parents. They had kids and they didn't want somebody else's kids standing out in the rain. What did bother them was when they realized the kids started passing the time by ripping up all the flowers around the house. Parents called the school to complain and had a nice chat with the principal. That Saturday, all the kids who used that stop showed up to replant the flowers which they or their parents paid for. When the flowers were replanted, they got to spend a few more hours helping with our other yard work. Then the school moved its bus stop to the main road on the edge of the neighborhood. That meant about 2 more blocks of walking every day for most of them and waiting in a field with no shelter from bad weather. Story 8. There's actually a complete video of mine. Here at the University of Connecticut, they serve special mac and cheese on certain days. I'm sure lots of schools do it. But our bacon jalapeno mac is pretty damn good. Well, a certain sophomore from a wealthy family who was used to being bailed out of trouble by his rich parents got drunk and decided he wanted some mac and cheese. He was clearly intoxicated and had the balls to walk around the food court drinking beer. The manager sees this and won't let him in the food line. As seen in the video, our boy spends the next 10 minutes mercilessly berating the poor guy and his staff for being beneath him. The manager gives him so many chances to just walk away, but our boy isn't leaving without his mac. He shoves the manager, not for the first time, and another employee decides he's done with this shit. Hero employee tackles our boy and pins him. Shithead spends the next few minutes pinned to the ground while the cops arrive, screams, "I'm absolutely fucked," and is arrested. Not his first arrest, not his first expulsion from a college. From what I hear, he has also been arrested or expelled from another school. We'll never forget you, Mr. Mac and Cheese Kid. Story 9. Boy Scout camp out in Utah, when the Boy Scouts were pretty much run by the Mormon Church. A porcupine walked through our camp and this spoiled rich kid got a stick and chased it up a tree. We all told him to stop. He wouldn't listen. Scout leaders were off doing God knows what at the time. So this porcupine is up the tree and now the spoiled weenie wants to shoot hard candy with his wrist rocket. He can't get a clear shot, so he climbs up the tree and sits on a branch under the porcupine. Shoots a hard candy at the porcupine and hits it hard. It was right then that he learned that when a treed porcupine feels threatened, it just lets go and lets the quills break the fall. The big-ass porcupine fell right into the spoiled kid's shoulder, bounced off, hit his thigh, and then landed on the ground. It waddled away and we just laughed at the now howling spoiled kid. One of the scout leaders had to drive the kid to an emergency room. I hope he caught hell for not supervising too. Story 10. On the first day of a 2-week vacation, I saw my spoiled 10-year-old cousin tell his mother, his older female cousin, his aunt, and his grandmother that he wasn't going to clear his place or rinse his dishes because that's women's work. For the rest of that 2-week vacation, nobody had to lift a finger to clear a plate, rinse a dish, or wash a pot because it was his job. At times, there were over a dozen of us there. Story 11. Used to work at a non-overnight summer camp school program and a week-long soccer camp. The town isn't huge, so needless to say, over a few years I got to know several kids from different programs. One 10-year-old boy I knew from after-school care was a total prick. Bully, snob, didn't think he had to listen, tattletale, personal pet peeve, just awful. He came to my soccer camp and proceeded to make fun of an 8-year-old girl because she had old cleats where he had the newest Nikes and a brand new cool design ball. Unfortunately for him, I also knew this 8-year-old girl and knew that the reason her cleats looked old and worn down was that she was a motherfucking beast, just all-around amazing athlete who loved soccer and played hours every day. I paired him with her for a simple drill where one person started with a ball and you just try to get past the other person and kick the ball at a stationary ball or cone about 10 yards away to simulate passing and scoring accurately while under pressure. He was of course angry, saying she was too young and a girl. I said if he hit the cone 3 times, he could pick his partner. He again pointed out her shoes to me as if that were going to change my mind before going in and playing. She proceeded to humiliate him over the next few minutes, not once letting him dribble past her in 5 attempts. He was livid, bending down, messing with laces as if the shoes really mattered, then saying he needed to use his ball. Nothing worked. He was so angry, I thought he was going to be violent, but then it was her turn to be on offense. He talked some kind of smack, I forgot what, and refused to let her use his ball. She didn't say a word and got a new ball. I blew a whistle and she did a step-over fake which made him move to the side she stood back up straight and kicked it between his legs and hit the cum. She barely even moved. He was so fucking angry. Second round, he charged her screaming, but she kept her cool and wound back like she was going to drill it at his dumb face. He ducked and squealed as she dribbled around him with his hand still covering his head and hit the cone. I didn't make her embarrass him for the remaining 3 attempts and called a water break. The kid was just dumbfounded. He honestly thought his shoes were going to make him better without any effort. He behaved better the rest of the week, but honestly, I think she just broke his spirit. He just seemed out of it. Hope he's doing all right. The girl is like an all-American high school soccer player last time I checked. I won't be surprised if I see her in the Olympics one day. Story 12. I was about 15. I was in the woods with some friends, local public nature reserve, playing on a rope swing, drinking energy drinks, eating snacks, chatting, and just having a good time keeping to ourselves, really. The rope swing itself was on a very tall tree, hanging over what I can only explain as a miniature valley. Two small hills, a gap in the middle, rope swing on one side, but will reach the other side. Then some kids came along on their bikes, maybe 10 to 12, dressed up in tracksuits and quite mouthy, you know the type. They tell us then to move along from their rope swing, and it wasn't theirs. I set that thing up myself because I was like a Spider-Man kid back then. I could climb anything. Obviously, we said no, but we did say we'll leave them to it for a bit if they want to have a go. There's no reason we can't all enjoy it. They wouldn't take that answer, so we carried on playing on the rope swing, but then they began throwing sticks and rocks at us, which didn't faze us. Next thing, one of them tries to show off and speeds down the hill on his bike to try and grab me while I swing, but his mate throws a stick at the same time and it lodges in his wheel and sends him flying down the hill. To add insult to injury, he flies right in my swing path and gets 2 knees to the ribs. Completely took the wind out of him, and so they all left feeling defeated. It feels good because we did nothing out of order. The cards just worked in our favor. Story 13. I worked as an outdoor camp instructor. One week I was on logistics and had to drive the van to pick up the kids. I had heard from my friend that one of the kids in his group was a little shit, back-chatting, lazy, and bullying other kids. When I got to the pickup point, the kids hopped into the van and my mate in the shotgun. My mate Mitch gave me the rundown of the kid. As I started the van up, I did a visual check of seatbelts and everyone was good, except for the kid. I asked and he said no. I told him I can't leave until he puts it on, so he did and I started to leave. A minute down the road, I heard him unclip his seatbelt again, so I had to stop the van and ask him again. He put it back on. This happened one more time. On the third time, I just pulled over and turned the van off, radioed base, and asked for my manager and the overseeing teacher who was his dean to come up and pick this kid up because he was a danger to the others in the van. That's when this kid started pleading and begging. Told him no. I already made the call. He got sent home, and my mate Mitch had one of the best weeks ever after this kid left. Story 14. Working at Chuck E. Cheese for 1 year. Some little kid keeps getting pissed because he can't win many tickets from a game. The kid begins to kick and scream, toss around, etc. I think he tries to hit one of the animatronics. When someone tried to get him to stop, he pulled the "Do you know who my dad is? Do you know what he can do to you?" We all just shook our heads and didn't know what to say. Was his dad the owner, rich, etc.? Tell me what I can do. We see this guy in a business suit just standing there with a really pissed off look on his face. It was the kind of face that you look at and wonder if this man never smiled. The kid just froze up and muttered something. The man apologized and walked away. He came back a few hours later and gave all the employees gifts. I got an Xbox 360, one of the first generation ones. I still have it with me if anyone wants a picture. He just gave me the console, no wires, controllers, or anything. Damn, he totally gave away the kid's stuff, huh? Story 15. We were poor growing up, like ham or cheese sandwich kind of poor. When I was 13, I asked my single mother to combine Christmas and birthday gifts, the birthday being in March. I had wanted a nice bike for years, but didn't want to ask for anything specific. I was happy with any gift. I asked very respectfully for a dyno comp bicycle. My awesome mom delivered, and in March, I got my favorite present of all time. Within 3 or 4 days, my best friend and his little brother, who of course were very well off, showed up at my house both with higher-end freestyle bikes. We went for a ride and the brothers ended up grazing each other and creating a scratch on the older brother's bike. He was furious and slammed his own bike on the ground, then knocked his little brother over and commenced stomping on both wheels. The younger brother returned the favor on the other bicycle. Then they actually had a contest to see who could destroy a bicycle more drastically. This was the first time I think my jaw dropped and I was just plain speechless. Once I regained my orientation, I just turned and pedaled away. I immediately started crying at why kids would trash brand new bicycles. They both showed up that weekend with 2 new bikes. I made up some lie and said I was grounded. I couldn't be friends with someone like that anymore. I just thought, my mom worked so hard for my bike and these guys destroyed $800 bikes. If my mom knew, I wouldn't even be allowed to be friends with them. Story 16. Mitch got everything he wanted. Granted, he was smart and ambitious, but was also petulant and snobby. The combination made him virtually hated by everyone. I liked him more than most people, and I hate him. Quote Al Franken on Ted Cruz. Our 3rd grade class would get Monopoly money for an auction of toys at the end of the year. If you were bad, you had to pay money, but if you were a little sycophant like Mitch, you were filthy rich. At the end of the year, Mitch surveyed all the toys and calculated how many brownie points it would take to swipe all the best stuff. One by one, Mitch swiped the best toys, always bidding perfectly. In the end, Mitch had enough for the most coveted toy on the table, the Chia Pet. Brent had the second most money and timidly started the bidding. Mitch toyed with him and gradually raised the price until Brent had to go all in. Mitch raised the bid by a small margin, and then Susan, who almost had a Nerf gun, gave her sizable pile to Brent, and Brent raised. Mitch panicked and counted his money for a higher bid, but it was already too late. All the people he had screwed suddenly turned the auction into a popularity contest, and Brent delivered the final blow. Mitch freaked the f out and had the most satisfying meltdown. If he had just tried to get a few things, no one would have wanted to screw him, but by leaving so many people with so much worthless cash, he was truly hoisted by his own petard. F Mitch. Lol. Story 17. My neighbor down the street and his little brother were two of the most spoiled kids I'd ever met, and their mother was just horrible. For context, the younger brother's first word was shit. I wish I was lying, I really do. One day, the younger brother was having a vicious temper tantrum while I was over playing some GTA 3 with the older sibling. Unprovoked, he threw a pair of scissors that hit my elbow, and I had to go to the hospital for a few stitches. His mother just yelled at him with a Newport hanging out of her mouth, which I felt wasn't sufficient justice. The next day, I went back, left my arm in a sling, and smashed that little in the face with a bucket. Story 18. I think I was around 9 or so, and I made friends with another kid down the road. It was his grandparents' place, and he visited a lot. If I remember correctly, we met through baseball. He was incredibly overweight and bossy. He always made the rules of the games we played and would throw major tantrums if I objected. For instance, while playing with action figures, I had the toy do some cool flips. He went crazy, saying how it needed to be realistic. The first time I visited his house, I was blown away by the volume of toys he had. Growing up fairly poor, I was accustomed to having maybe one cool toy. He had all the PlayStation games and a huge collection of anime VHS. Not surprisingly, his parents were overweight as well and would make dense ass dinners that would take me 2 days to recover from. Eventually, during one sleepover, he wanted to play wrestle. Didn't take but a second to know how bad of an idea that is, him being 100 plus pounds. Especially since he wanted us to be shirtless. Huh? I refused and he cried, telling me to take my shirt off and to wrestle. I remember walking out and asking his mom for a ride home. She just gave me the look of, I understand. 2 days later, he shows up at my house asking for me to come out. My brother told him I wasn't home as I walked by the kitchen. He flipped his shit and that's the last I ever heard of him. I didn't know you were friends with Eric Cartman. Story 19. Not really a kid since the dude was in his 40s, but he acted like one. His mother paid for his life. Rent, bills, food, everything. He was super mean to her whenever she would call, and he had a crazy bad temper. I was homeless at the time, and my former boyfriend and I would come around his place sometimes. He would say the most f***ed up shit to me. One time, he asked me if women were even human. Anyway, he always made a kind of point to throw money around casually and rip on us for being homeless, but then he'd be super shitty if any kind of exchange was made. For example, he asked my ex to install a new lock for him, agreed to pay him some bullshit lowball amount, and then never paid at all. The last day I saw him, he got pissed off about something and threw a keg at my ex's head. His place was full of music equipment he never used. Guitars, drums, amps, soundboards, all kinds of expensive stuff. My ex dodged the keg and it flew and hit a bunch of equipment. The dude proceeded to completely trash all of his own stuff in a man-toddler rage. As we left, he followed us down the street screaming obscenities and threatening to kill me. I didn't get to witness this myself, unfortunately, but he apparently got arrested because he mouthed off to a cop and told her he owns the LAPD and that she could arrest him later, but he was busy right then. I actually know this officer and I wish I could have seen her face when he said all of that. Suffice it to say, she wasn't having that shit and took him to jail. I heard that when he got out some months later, he'd been kicked out of his place and all his stuff was gone. Pretty sure he's homeless now.